Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about us at officehours.global. First hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. Second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today, by popular request, we're going to talk a little bit about audio in the ATEM. How does this actually work? There's a lot of powerful tools that were brought in when they bought Fairlight, but how do we actually make those work? So we'll talk about that today in the second hour. Make sure to tag your questions if that's if that's what you have questions about. Tomorrow we're going to talk about USDZ. USDZ is a format that, well, USD is more of a Pixar format, and USDZ is an Apple format, but it's open. It's an open format, and we think it's going to be a big deal. And we're going to show you how we're using it in motion and in just general product viewing. It's a pretty exciting 3D format that I think that you're gonna be able to tell people in about a year and a half or 2 years that we were talking about that years ago. So because it's going to be a big deal. So anyway, so stay tuned for that. We're going to talk about, we finally have kind of cracked the code on how to get it to actually work, which was no small feat. And so we're going to be talking about that. Thursday, we're going to give you an office hours update. What's going on? Where obviously there's a lot of work happening. You can see it in the in our panel. As we start to kind of figure things out and how do we get the switching working and everything else. So Andy and team will be here to talk about what's actually happening. We'll get your feedback as well about what you like and don't like so far. Friday, we're going to talk about Zoom events now with conferences. So that's going to be coming up on Friday. We have a special guest. That'll come up by and talk with us about that. So stay tuned for that on Friday. And then on Saturday, of course, is education. We don't stream that, so you have to be here in Zoom to do that. 10 a.m. We're going to be cooking. We'll be back in YouTube and into the webinar for cooking with Damayanti Gajar. We're going to be making garam masala mix with spicy scrambled eggs. Pretty excited about that, and I'm going to be building up my system a little bit more. So we'll show a little behind the scenes as well. I think that Hosmuk has got a pretty good behind the scenes, and I feel like I need to up my game. So we'll be turning the volume up on that, and really, it's more of a experimentation. It's by the way, it's changing the way I cook. So it's really good as far as cooking goes, but it's also real experimentation and kind of collaborative learning. So definitely check it out. And then finally at noon, we're returning to Belfast for the Belfast Method. So stay tuned for that. All right, let's jump into the questions. Courtney, what do we have?
All righty, starting things off, we have John Preto from Vegas. Says, what is your favorite method to download YouTube videos?
Go ahead, Jason.
My very favorite is an app called Downy. I got the Permute transcoder too, and it just works beautifully.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I take the URL, open it up in VLC, go to the info, and you can actually find the source URL for the video, open that up, and then download it there. So that's a free version, a couple more workarounds.
Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Yes, also second the Downy app, and it's very simple. Copy. And then once you open the feature, it says it's already right there in your clipboard. Then I think you can also decide what style of video or audio file that you want to capture.
Yep. Go ahead, John.
We split the panel 2-2. I vote with Jeff. After using all the plugins and the downloaders and the one-pagers, got frustrated. VLC, if you follow these easy 17 steps, you can download.
Then I'll break the tie with Downy. I use Downy all the time. I will say VLC works perfectly well, and it does it. Downy gives you a couple more tools, a couple more tools to work with. And if you're doing it as a business and you're doing it quickly, and you have to do a lot of them, Downy makes it a lot easier to do, just from a time perspective. Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I use an app on the Mac called Airy, AIRY. And it works really well, and you can choose the level of level of bit rate that you want.
Yeah.
It's a very nice app.
There you go, Roscoe.
4K downloader is one app I like.
That's great. Very good. We got a couple more open mics. Check your mics. Next question.
Coming in from Rupert McCrae in Dallas, Texas, he says Zoom has announced a pilot program to make free accounts supported by ads in the web portal. One can imagine how this might expand to the app later. What are the panel's thoughts on Zoom becoming ad-supported at the free tier?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Well, it's assuming they're not going to do anything midstream, because that would be a disaster. Education won't put up with it. Putting any kind of advertising into the education channel is a big no-no. So most education places have bought a license and distribute those licenses out to the students, but it will become a budget line item for all educational budgets.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I just think was inevitable as sustainability is trying to figure this out. And since ads, and see, what I'd like to try to misappropriate would be the word free, because time is something that you are giving and investing. And so that's my only commentary would be, it's not free. It's your time.
Yeah, I think it's probably a mixture of, it does cost money to move video around the internet. So a lot of people have gotten it free. I think that it was great that Zoom didn't do that during the COVID, time. But I think that it makes sense at the size they're at. And it's probably a pretty big ticket number. So I think it both underwrites some of the costs of making that free, as well as coaxing people towards, investing in the product. Go ahead, Rupert.
I think it's also interesting that many people have free accounts simply for the ability to log into paid meetings being hosted by somebody else. So, they are participating in what is otherwise a paid meeting, but may just have a free account themselves to have a login. So it's maybe a little bit of a shame that those people might be exposed to some ads when they go into their app. First of all, the website, maybe later the app, who knows, but when they're just using it as a user.
Right. Go ahead, Courtney.
Curious to know how they would implement advertising, whether it would be a pre-roll, because since you're dealing with live stuff, you can't just pause it, and a live meeting. So maybe they're going to do banners or some type of branding at the top or the side might be a way to sell advertising, but I don't see them running video ads.
Yeah, it's, I think that the banner ads in the web make a lot of sense. I think that's the web, no one should be using the web portal. So it's just a reminder that you shouldn't be doing that. Anyway, but I think that the banners probably make sense to do that. Getting into the app will be more complicated. Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I think it's got to be up front. Anything midstream is going to destroy Zoom's credibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next question.
This one comes in from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. Can the panel talk about the use case for the ATEM Mini and the Stream Deck for video production or streaming use?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, Tony, you and I need to exercise this bicycle a little harder, because this is an amazing little tool that can do a lot of the multifunction button pushing that we want to do in a single button. The simplest I use is for Unity, and the ability to turn the mic on and off. It does work for me, or trying to isolate who I'm trying to talk to. Again, this is all inside the Unity concept, but within the ATEM, anytime you have multiple buttons that you want to push, to have a single connectivity. So yes, Tony, you and I should work and figure some things out together.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
The ATEM has 200 some buttons on it, and some of them just really don't belong there, but that's a discussion for another time. But using the Stream Deck, so far I'm pretty basic. What I'm doing is basically duplicating the main buttons that I mess with while I'm doing a program, and the fact that there are multiple pages, it's just a very simple matter to slip up and go down to the different pages for different applications where you're assigning super sources. And I'm looking forward to putting Mix Effects Plus on it, which will be a game changer.
Go ahead, Jason.
Even the most inexpensive ATEM Mini can run macros. And our very own John Barker on the panel right now just made an amazing set of macros that can be loaded in. They're going to require a little bit of modification, I think, for the simplest of non-super source, but that is a very compelling use case for the Stream Deck.
I have to admit that the number of misfires that I've had with the Stream Deck has me I use it for comms, so that I can hit the button twice if it doesn't work. But I stopped using it for production because I kept on having it do things that I didn't expect it to. And it only takes a couple times before I don't want to play with that anymore. So I think that it's just the responsiveness of how I hit a button and either does something twice or it doesn't do it a couple times, and that becomes problematic for me. Go ahead, Josh.
Just a thought, Universe Controller seems to be getting some traction. I wonder if that might be more stable than the BitFocus options.
Maybe. We don't know. I know I think that all of these things, when you have a software activate something from being hit, it's just there's a bunch of things that can go wrong. So anyway, it's just a matter. I mean, we're really excited about Universe, and we're going to know a lot about it as we keep moving forward with Office Hours 2.0 because it's the interface for the TD. How's it working for you so far, John? Just as little. Are you using it?
I broke it instantly, and I am backtracking from that breaking, but I'm back in again. I think it was my fault, but we're going again.
Okay, outstanding. All right, next question.
All right, coming in from TJ Asher in Minneapolis, Minnesota. He says, I recall hearing that the Office Hours Remotes Band had Songs 3 and Songs 4 in the works this past summer. Well, where are they?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, TJ and everybody, they are still in the works. One, it's a long process, and we're very, very particular. We want excellence. And number two, thankfully, everybody is really busy. We hit September, and everybody's workload just went crazy. And so Office Hours Remotes Band is kind of the last thing we get to. We're all devoting a lot of time to it, but it's hard to get us all together, get the parts covered.
Absolutely. I'd much rather have great songs than have them come out quickly. So I think it's the right
They will be.
Yeah, absolutely. So far, they've been amazing. Next question.
Coming in from Danny Law in Malaysia. He says, if a site needs to live stream concurrently either 8 1080p on the extreme ISO or 6 1080p and 2 4K for the Web Presenter 4K, how much bandwidth is needed to run these live streams successfully?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
1080p 5 megabits per second minimum, and 4K 25 megabits per second minimum. So multiply it out from there. But it's kind of it depends what quality, there's a lot of variables there.
Yeah, usually we take those numbers and we double them. So we probably wouldn't consider 4K needing to be 25, but we'd probably say 15 for the minimum. But then we double that to 30. So this gets very close to what Roscoe was talking about. But we would say 10 per 1080p stream is what we would want to see if we're not doing ladders. So if we're only doing a single RTMP out, a lot of times we encode all the entire ladder in our on-prem, which then means that every on-premise, every level that you see in YouTube, we're putting not on YouTube, but we put out. But if you're doing a single RTMP stream out, we would say 10 megabits per second minimum for bandwidth allocation. You may be only doing 6 or 8, but you want double whatever you're using so that you have headroom. Otherwise, you're going to bump up against that if there's any kind of fluctuation. So to take your highest bandwidth that you're using on your encoder and double that, and then multiply that by the number of streams. That's a number that's what you want to ask for. You can get it down to as little as 25%, but you get any below 25% headroom and you will have problems, I promise. Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, he says, if you were purchasing a MacBook Pro for media productions applications, would you purchase a 14-inch or a 16-inch? When I tried my main digital audio workstation application, Bitwing Studio on Ableton spinoff on a 14-inch.
I think it's Ableton.
Ableton? Sorry.
Ableton, yeah. Yep.
Ableton. One of these days I'll learn. It was very comfortable. I wasn't able to test other apps, though.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
One of the benefits of the new MacBook Pros is that you can actually get the pretty much top-of-the-line configuration in whatever size you'd like. So at the end of the day, I've got to say it depends, but based on your use case, I don't think you need a high-end 16.
I would go with, if you get a chance, go with the Max chip. You want to get because you're going to be using it for video and other things, go with the Max chip and get as much RAM as you can get.
Go ahead, Jeff.
In the 16-inch, you have a little bit more space, and so the cooling will be easier. You're going to have less chance of spinning up the fans in the 16 than the 14. So, in media applications, that may be something that's worthwhile. And I like more screen real estate.
Yeah, I use my computers for a long time, so usually I don't max out drive space because I don't like to keep a lot of stuff on my drives. I like to keep them on external drives. So I have a tendency not to max the drive space out, but from a CPU perspective, I tend to max it out every single time. So I would go to the max and 16-inch, and then I know that I'd probably keep it for 5 years. Next question.
All right, this one comes in from Tony Mobley in Noonan, Georgia. It says, if the Brio may not work with Office Hours 2.0, what would be the next level of camera to use? Asking because he's planning for the future.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think you're good to go, Tony, on that Brio. It makes pretty pictures. A lot of the panelists are using it. But if you had to upgrade a good quality DSLR, should do the job for you. I would get one with interchangeable lenses on it. I mentioned the Sony EV10. It's a ZV EV10 or E10. Has removable E-type lenses on it, and it makes nice pictures. It's got a pretty decent size sensor in it. It's a good step up from Brio, but I don't think you need to move away from Brio anytime soon.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, I go with a DSLR, although I know Alex would recommend going to the 4K if you can afford it. The mid step would be like the one I'm using here is a Canon M30 Mark II. It was recommended to me, and it works quite well. You do have to get a battery adapter to run it off continuously off of external power, but it outputs a nice clean 1080p, and it has autofocusing if you get the right lenses, of course, and a lot of auto controls, which you can kind of leave it hands off, but you can go in and color correct it and do a lot of controls with it that way.
Go ahead, John.
Tony, that's a good question. The next step up that I would look at, and don't forget the used market. I'm on Facebook Marketplace right now. The Sony A series, the 6000 series, or there's a ton of Panasonic Lumixes out there. The GH3s still look really, really good.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Used market, there's some really good stuff out there. So, and the real question in some ways is, are you going to come in USB, or are you going to put an ATEM mini or some sort of, HDMI to USB converter in between? Because that kind of sends you down two different roads.
I agree. I think that number one is the Brio will be fine for quite some time. so I don't want to worry anybody related to that. And then the second thing I would say that if you already have an ATEM, I would always get a Blackmagic camera to go with a Blackmagic. It doesn't, you can decide what size or whatever, but it's just so much. It's, life changing, to have that. I couldn't imagine. Every once in a while I have a computer where I can't talk to the camera, and it's just such a pain. So if you don't have that, then I think that there's lots of options, as far as what you want. But I think otherwise it's worth saving up and waiting and just keeping your Brio until you can afford to buy something that'll actually integrate with your switcher. Next question.
All right, next question comes in from Rupert McCrae in Dallas. He says, is there a way to auto-generate a YouTube video thumbnail from a specific timestamp in the video?
I don't know of any way to do that. I find that the thumbnail process on YouTube is pretty frustrating. You just end up having to build your own. find the frame that you want and customize it. We do a little bit of that on ours, but when I do it for other clients and so on and so forth, we dress them up. So it's not just that you want to use some frame. I admit that I use YouTube for office hours. We're about to change this, so as we go into the next round of this, we'll make it. We'll get more aggressive about how we when you see it in the new channel, it'll all be designed. So what we'll do is we'll take a frame out and then we'll design around it and then we'll put it back up again, because that's really the way that you get it. It really affects views. The quality of that. You're never going to find a frame in the video that is as good as you taking it into Photoshop and putting something on it. People are scanning them, in their next view or whatever, and they're making decisions about it. And you need it to be readable in that time, in that small area, and easily figured out. And it makes a massive difference in views. I haven't been trying yet, but we will as we kind of go forward. So that's my recommendation. Next question.
Coming in from Melbourne, Australia, it's Stuart Fairweather asks, speaking of the ATEM minis, vMix external controllers are stupidly expensive for something that's basically just a bespoke keyboard. Is there any way to use an original ATEM mini, not the Pro, ISO, or Extreme, as the external USB controller for vMix?
I have a feeling that you could probably do something like that with OSC, to talk back and forth, but go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to give you another alternative that is not stupidly expensive. The Korg micros are excellent, and those will absolutely work.
Yeah, that's great. That's a better solution. Next question.
Coming in from Vienna in Australia, says, what are the panelist predictions on whether the Mac Mini will have an M1 chip by the end of WWDC? Just curious.
Jason?
I think it just depends on how quickly they can get out the 27-inch iMac and how well the current M1 Minis are selling. So they've got no pressure on them. I'd say 50-50.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, you would think it's a no-brainer to throw the new chips, the Pro and the Max, into a Mac Mini. So I would expect they'd beat out. Is this the site that that Renee quotes all the time? Is it Apple Track, Alex?
I don't know.
Watch these guys that are the leakers, and some of these guys are pretty accurate. So keep an eye on those.
Yeah, go ahead, Roscoe.
With all silicon, its yield curve on what, they actually have to, they're probably making M1 Max chips and then downgrading them to Pros or whatever. So I don't know what the yield curve is going to be on the new dies that they're coming out of the factory. So that'll have a availability of the chips to put into a mass item is a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Mac Minis just make a lot of sense. I do think that it makes more sense that they didn't announce them right now because they're going to maximize their revenue from the MacBook Pros. I think that it's about a 90% chance that by the end of WWDC, we'll see the Mac Minis with the most powerful chips they make because they are basically becoming a server class, computer at half a U. And for many people, that is super powerful. So, for us, we may have a hard time thinking about it, but think about being able to build a render farm, with all of these that are a stack of, 10 or 15 or 20 of these things, having Cinema 4D or Final Cut or Compressor or, Resolve, being able to go out to those. I would say that I think that even though I bought a bunch of 1 gigs, I think I'm not buying any more Mac Minis without 10 gig connections because I think that in a render farm style environment, I think you want to have the 10 gig to move things around. Next question.
Coming in from Michael Drosty in Peoria, Illinois. He says, Fender purchased Personas. Is this a good move, or will it be like Gibson buying Opcode and later killed off the product? And he has a link to the news article.
Well, they definitely have some good idea. They spend a lot of money on it, so hopefully they're going to do something with it. The hardest part for corporations when they buy these is to figure out what to do with it. You have a culture that you have to embed into it. It seems like Fender and Personas would have very different cultures, but I could be wrong. And then the incorporation of the technology. I could imagine Fender wanting to kind of upgrade a lot of what they do into a more digital, just pure digital, like Ethernet into the guitars kind of thing. But I don't, and you need somebody who understands how to do all of that stuff to make that work. So, but go ahead, Jeff.
I think this is a good move. Fender has had some audio things, but nothing that's considered pro by any means. And so Personas is on that low-end pro, high-end prosumer. So Fender pulling them in and being able to make that their audio side of things is a great move for Fender.
Yeah. Next question.
Coming in from Rupert McRae here on the Palace, here on the panel.
In the Palace.
In the Palace.
We had to change all our backgrounds now because we're in a palace. Here in the Palace. We stop calling them panelists and call them palace guards. Anyway, I don't know.
All right. In Dallas, he says, if I host a Zoom webinar that reaches capacity and Zoom then offers additional attendees a live stream URL instead, is there a way to get a Zoom report on those numbers, like 500 attended, 250 redirected, particularly if they were registered?
I don't know the answer, but I would definitely bring that answer to Friday. I think we're going to have people who can answer that question. So I would cache that question and bring it back because I think we're going to have someone good that can answer that question on Friday. Next question.
Coming in from Guy Cochran in Seattle, he says, how much would an Office Hours 2.0 infrastructure cost in total hardware?
Go ahead, Jason.
All right, so he didn't say how much should it cost. Let's go with, I'd say it could be comfortably done for what, $2,000? Anyone think that's about right?
You might be shooting a little low.
I'm being gentle, okay? We gotta lie to the people.
I think the question is how much it does cost. Go ahead, John.
Not even close. $2,000, you can't even buy a lens. We obviously think alike, Guy, because I did a little spreadsheet on my Studio C over here. It's about $15,000 to do it right. But then if you compare what we're doing to like drag racing or off-road racing, it's peanuts. And you have the ability to create revenue out of it.
Yeah, go ahead, Rupert.
The question was about infrastructure. I just wondered whether he's asking about the back end.
Yeah. Well, so the hardware is in the vicinity of 30,000.
The back end. Okay.
Yeah, the back end for it is in the ballpark of about 30 grand to have of hardware to make that work right now, and that's including the constellation, and there's a router which you could decide. I think the router's a good idea. I don't like to build things without routers. Then you have a couple frame converters, so we've got a couple Teranexes in there, but we need the FSHDR because and that's because we're going to HDR. So you could take that out if you wanted to. I'm doing color there. And then you have the 5 Mac Minis. Then you have the Sonnet boxes. Then you have the Duo cards. So it all seems like a little. When I started spending money on it, it all seemed like, oh, it'll just be a little bit of here, a little bit of there, and it's like, it's kind of a constant hole you keep putting stuff into. But it's now I think slowly stabilizing there. And then there's little things like monitors. There's like $2,000 worth of monitors that we use just to know what we're doing. So a lot of that stuff tends to.
And your wife lets you keep all this in the garage?
No, it's all in the office. I'm not allowed to keep it in the garage. So there's one room in the office with this we have to show it to you. You've seen the behind the scenes, but we'll post a photo of it. It's kind of it's this little beast that does that. Now that's much less expensive than the I Know version of it is about $500,000. So it's a different level of capacity. Next question.
Another one coming in from Rupert McCrae in the Dallas Palace says, in Zoom, sometimes participants get the host has another meeting in progress message when trying to join a meeting, when in fact, the host does not obviously have another meeting in progress. Any ideas?
Jason?
I'm going to push back on that. The host absolutely has another meeting in progress. That's exactly what that means. And what you should do is just leave it right there. Don't cancel and come back in. Just let it get there, and you'll be the first one in the meeting.
Go ahead, Josh.
I'm just going to take a guess. Sometimes the messages might be compressed. So perhaps if the meeting is set to only join, you can't join before the host. There's no alt host. And perhaps if the only person that can start that is not signed in, perhaps you'll get that message. It's something to test.
Sorry, go ahead, Rupert.
The problem in this case is we're seeing hosts having participants trying to join their meetings, and the participants are calling or whatever host saying, hey, look, I'm trying to get into a meeting, and it's saying you have another meeting in progress, and the host is oblivious to it. They can't see where they have another meeting in progress. They probably do, but it's not obvious to them.
Right. I think that the host would just need to make sure that because you can only be in one at a time, so the host just needs to jump into that meeting, and it should kick them. They'll know that they were in another meeting because it'll say, "Do you want to quit the other meeting? Do you want to leave or quit the other meeting when you go into this one?" So the best thing for them to do is to see where that happens. I have had that happen where I get onto a meeting in a phone. Usually it's that I joined another meeting, not that I started another meeting, but I joined another meting. And I'm on that call, and then I put my phone down or something like that, and then or I go up to my computer, and suddenly it says, and then it'll generate that code. So if they're in another meeting, not their own meeting, in another meeting, if their account is active in a Zoom meeting somewhere, it will show up as they're in another meeting. So it doesn't have to be their meeting that's there. So I think that's probably what's causing that error. Next question.
Coming in from frequent contributor Douglas Carmichael, he says, can you use automated detection algorithms like Andy Carluccio's Isadora detection file to automatically cut a play or an opera?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
I would say anytime you're looking at a cutting something, a reaction is the most important item. And so having an algorithm cut in the middle of a sentence to figure out when the reaction is going to take place is not going to happen. So no.
Good, Sky.
I, at one point, was with a repertory theater company, and we would do about 300 plays a summer. We would not have time to rehearse, but we would have a wide shot, a close-up going to the stage left, close-up going to stage right, and then we'd have a script. And I referred to it as a scripted basketball game because we knew where the lines were supposed to and who was supposed to say and speak next, but we didn't have the opportunity of really rehearsing the camera moves. We got pretty good at it after 300 episodes or 300, events, but a scripted basketball is the best example I could give to what you're trying to talk about. And to Roscoe's point, you're looking for the reaction. Then, of course, from the storytelling point, when do you want to complete wide shot to get the reactions of the other characters that are talking or speaking or in the scene? So it's a cinematography question that I don't know if an AI, even though they are trying to at Netflix, they've got a whole algorithm of the scenes that you're being shot and where they go in the show. So it'd be a lot of programming.
I think there's a real gift when the computer does stuff for you. It solves little things that you don't want to do. But having a human make those decisions, the final decisions of how it's going to work, really makes a massive difference in the overall quality of a show. There's nothing that's going to replace an exceptional human being doing what they do exceptionally. Now, can the computer replace someone who doesn't know what they're doing? Yeah, probably. So we have to remember that there are places for automation, which is that nobody knows how to do this, and we'll let the computer run it. And so we're looking at ways to do kind of an enough auto that if we don't have anyone available, we could turn it on and it would do something. And we have the advantage here. The auto isn't really in the same way as an opera on stage. People are singing, you don't know who it is. Here we know everybody because Zoom is telling us, this person's talking, that person's talking. So the automation is that we're getting cues back in Zoom OSC that allow us to drive behaviors. We're also getting information from the back end of Mukana, which is telling Zoom who's in the next super source and who's, there's a bunch of things that are happening that are not, some of them are automated, but it's not cleanly like, oh, I'm just guessing who's talking. It knows. Next question.
Coming in from Guy Cochran in Seattle. Says, I went to register for a few of the 455 sessions in today's Microsoft Ignite virtual event, only to find them full. Why would capacity be limited on a virtual event?
I don't know. Anyway, I'm sorry. Sorry. Just all I can see is goofy event producers doing goofy things. Like it just someone's got some wild hair that they have that they think is a way to create constrained supply, which is going to make people feel like it's more popular or something. But it's stupid. Anyway, Courtney.
I know if they charge for those sessions, maybe the Microsoft figured out they're making too much money and would throw them into an even higher tax bracket.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that the other issue is like Zoom. They could, if they're doing it in Teams or they're doing it in there could be there's limits to the real time the real time WebRTC or whatever you're using for that, whether it's Skype or a WebRTC protocol. There are limits like Zoom, but you can usually break those limits by adding more, pieces. So, but I think that they're not ready for that. I think Microsoft will be happy to just have a keynote that doesn't fail. So I think that they. So I think that they're just going to play it safe and not try to add multiple rooms to the same session. But I know that in Zoom, I believe that the max is 50,000 that you can put into one event. And so then if they want to do 300,000, they have to have 6 events being simulcasted. And if you had 455 of those multiplied by the possibility of multiple rooms, it gets pretty complicated. So it could have to do with their real-time protocols. Next question.
This one comes in from James Babbitt in San Diego, California. It says, on Saturday, Alex mentioned converting Kindle books into high-quality audiobooks. What are the steps to do this?
Oh, my goodness. Okay. So you have to install, I think this is a backdoor. So I think it's not supposed to work because someone pointed out to me on Twitter that privately that you're not supposed to talk about that. So this is you're not supposed to talk about tip that I'm still going to talk about. The iPhone does not support playing back your Kindles. I guess you have to buy a Kindle for that or a Fire or something like that. That's the idea, to get you to buy the hardware. So it's a artificial thing, but it's capable of doing it. It just doesn't let you. If you install Alexa on your iPhone and then tell Alexa, sorry, I'm using the word, but tell the thing to play your book, it will play it, and it works. It works great. The only thing that's a pain is that you have to have Alexa to do it. But it is a pain in the neck to do. But once it's working, the voice is actually easier to listen to than a human voice, in my opinion, at speed. When I say at speed, I'm usually listening at 1.5 or 2. So at speed, the diction is better, so I can listen to it faster. And so I still listen to the audiobooks because they're easier to listen to, but there's tons of Kindle books that aren't available in Audible. So I use the Kindle app to listen to those books, and so I have to use that. And it's just, I don't understand why I can't just click on it and hit play, but evidently Amazon's got some goofy algorithm that says that they should punish us for not buying another device. Next question.
Coming in from Art by Junior in Cupertino, says, I've noticed when a camera is pointed at an LED wall and the image picked up by the camera is then displayed on a projector, it seems to add a lot of blue, even though the white balance is spot on. The people on the image look normal.
Good. Roscoe?
Well, spot on is a kind of a relative to spot on for the projector, because you actually have to set for the white balance of projector and projectors, or I'm sorry, for the LED wall, and those tend to run into different color temperatures than what you're going to see in the room.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the LEDs look blue because they are more blue. It's the same thing if you're staring into a computer monitor screen and you turn the light up. If I did that right now, my face would turn blue because of the color balance of the LEDs themselves.
There's no reason why you can't have the background match. But when the LEDs come up, they are naturally, my experience is, and there's other people on this panel that might be able to extrapolate a little bit, but my experience is they come up at 6,500, which means they'll look blue. So 6,500 is where they're set, at when they're turned on. But there's no reason why you can't apply a curve to those or correct your footage or all those other things to have it be a color range within what you're doing, especially if all your lights are at 5,600 or something like that. So there's oftentimes, from a streaming perspective and cameras, there's this push back and forth between the live event crew and the streaming crew, which is that we're used to, are you doing 32 or 56, 100, Kelvin, and the event crew is like, wow, we were going to do the whole thing at 7,500 or 6,500 or something, and you're like, I need you to fit into one of these two boxes, and there's a lot of push back and forth between that, and so sometimes you see that in the projection and the lights and all kinds of other things. As we move more towards digital first productions and hybrid productions, the streaming crews are getting more and more leverage. And so you'll see that correct on the larger events, where that, you'll notice at really large events like Apple events or Microsoft events, you probably don't see the blue because they actually spent the time to correct it. But there's no reason why they can't have the color work. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the problem in that situation is you've got three different things with white point settings. You've got the LED wall, you've got the camera, and you've got the projector. And then you got the projector through the camera. And so they're all cumulative, and if any correction you do is cumulatively recorrected down the line. And so it's best to set them all to the same white point. Set them all to 5,600, light everything with 5,600 lights. And because usually the projectors have, daylight balanced projection bulbs. And it's harder to get them to project at a tungsten level. So you'd be best to light everybody with daylight set 5,600 to 6,000 Kelvin lights, and then set your video LED wall for the same white point and your projector for the same white point, and it should all come out okay.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
And traditionally, red has always been the hardest color for video to deal with, so therefore they default going into more of the blues and the greens because they just don't want to have to deal with the red.
A lot of it's just a function of time. How many setup days do you have to get ready for it? So the larger events that I normally work on, there's a solid week to figure things out. And so you can spend half a day getting the LED wall and the cameras and the lights to all, half a day or a whole day, getting all the LED lights and the cameras to go. If you load in the day before, you're not going to have that, and it's going to be what it is. So that's time is, most of these events, the reason you see oddities is because there wasn't enough time. Next question.
This one comes in from Douglas Carmichael again. The default Windows 10 and 11, as I've seen, installation requires a Microsoft account. How would you build a Windows 10 or 11 image for a universal deployment that does not need a Microsoft account?
I think it's universe development and deployment. Jason?
I'll answer the question exactly as asked, and then I think I'll give them a nice little workaround. There's an app called Image for Windows that does this beautifully, and that is exactly what it is designed to do. Second, unplug your Ethernet, turn off your Wi-Fi, and do a clean load of Windows 10, and it will say, "You're not connected to the internet. Dogs and cats may play together. You sure you don't want to do, a Microsoft account? You don't need it."
Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, Jason's exactly right. During the setup process there, if you don't have internet access, then you should be able to get the skip option there through the Microsoft account setup process. But it can also vary a little bit depending on whether you're dealing with a out-of-the-box installation on a manufactured system or whether you are doing a fresh installation. I'd certainly always recommend a fresh installation, and then variations on whether you're dealing with the Home, the Pro, or the Enterprise. Those were the Windows 10 versions anyway. I'd avoid Home at all costs. But in terms of imaging, imaging is a challenge these days because so many versions are updated so frequently, and there's so much. I prefer to kind of script my installations these days. But if you do want to image, you can use the sysprep method and then the Windows deployment designer to predefine a lot of that stuff and build your system as you want it, and then reset your preferences, bypass the Microsoft account, and deploy the system.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Rupert said most of it, although Microsoft has been working very, very hard to try and prevent you from installing it without a Microsoft account. And I've been told, I haven't tried it yet, but Windows 11 is very difficult, much more difficult to try and install just by disconnecting the internet from it when you're doing the install. And that's called a local account. And most of the time it will not. Now I think they will not let you. There was during the preliminary rollout and the testing period for Windows 11. A lot of people complained because they had completely locked out the ability to do a local account. I don't know if they fixed that before they released it or not, but you can check into it. And because Windows has a different set of It creates itself on any particular machine. If you're trying to roll it out for a deployment, all the machines must have exactly the same hardware. Otherwise, the HAL table will not work.
Next question.
Comes in from James Babbitt in San Diego. In Office Hours 2.0 with HDR video, what changes could panelists make to the backgrounds in their images?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I would certainly not do what I'm currently doing. I would do something more like what Josh Kaufman's doing. You see on the panel here. He has. I think he should speak for himself, but a lot of those pastel colors seem to work well with HDR. I'm still discovering. I'm learning as we go along. There he is, and as you can see, it's a wonderful combination of colors. And if it were done in HDR, it would just enhance that as opposed to mine looking bad.
Yeah, I think that we're all going to keep playing with it now. It's going to be a new thing, and it doesn't have to work all the time for everyone. But as we start to play with it, we're definitely noticing things that work. So things like John Preto and Rupert and Josh, all of those backgrounds seem to work exceptionally well in HDR. Now, we don't want to go too far on that because I'm still figuring out how to tune the HDR, so it doesn't look correct yet. So there's still a variety of tuning that I'm doing on the back end. You may see things either blow out or not work or whatever because I'm making adjustments on the back end. And it looked like somewhere it was working great, and then it stopped. It like literally changed in the middle of the show. So we're on the outer edge of not many people are even doing it on YouTube. So we're still learning how it all works. So stay tuned for that. It looked great a while ago, and then suddenly I looked at my phone and it was like, it looks like it went nuclear. So I'm not sure exactly what happened. So we'll take a look at it. Go ahead, Josh.
I wonder, I'm not sure about how your system's going to render it or how it can take advantage of it. Before you look at the background, you should probably see if the camera you're using can transmit that accurately or has a high dynamic range itself.
So we're cheating. We're just using 8-bit WebRTC basically transport, and we're extending that out. So you can actually get some colors. Where you're going to see a problem in that is gradients. So gradients will posterize a little bit from where they were before. So that's the part we have to keep on kind of playing with. But again, it's brand new brand new ground that we're going to be taking here. So as Andy's figuring out the process, or as Liminal, the whole team is figuring out the process of getting the switching to work, and as we kind of get the graphics up to speed and everything else, I'm trying to figure out how to make the HDR look good. And then once we finish the HDR and the switching, then we'll start figuring out 5.1 surround. And so we're just kind of, the goal is over the next 2 months, you'll see it slowly progress. Next question.
This one comes in from Dan Huber in Erie. Says, is Apple dangerously approaching too many Mac models for consumers to choose from?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
No, John Scully. That's all I have to say is John Scully. There was a
we're
Mac
not even
model.
near. We're not even near the
close.
Scully sphere.
New Mac. John Scully's buzzline was new Mac model every 30 days.
Oh my gosh, I was a Mac, deep Mac person that couldn't figure out what to buy. Like, that's when you know you're in trouble. Like, I just looked at them like, I don't understand which feature is what and how to make it work. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, and they're carefully managing their upgrade path, and that's how a company that sells mainly hardware makes a lot of money. It sells you an entry-level one that you cannot upgrade. So all of their stuff is pretty much fixed when you buy it. You don't have an upgrade path other than buying the next model up. And so that's how they get you to buy the next model up, then the next model up, then the next model up. So you have a nice range to choose from, and you're constantly upgrading.
Next question.
Sorry, it clicked. I really did. Art By Jr. in Cupertino says, on ATEM 4ME, can the downstream key be directed to ME2, or does it only work with ME1?
Go ahead, Jason.
On a fully autonomous ME4 like the Constellation, it is completely autonomous. You can route any ME to any other.
Yeah, so you can definitely have the downstream keys will work anywhere. You just have a limited number of them. So you can't, you'll run out of downstream keys, but you will not run out of. You can put them on any ME. Next question.
Coming from Douglas Carmichael, he says AMC Theaters offers live Metropolitan Opera. Wouldn't it be harder to mix or cut opera versus a pure concert because of the number of players on stage and thus channel count, and need to not have cameras intrude upon the stage blocking?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Would it be harder? Yes. How do they circumvent this? Rehearsal, rehearsal, rehearsal. People that know the music, they've rehearsed with it, and the opera has to rehearse for its staging. And so the audio people rehearse and the video people rehearse. How do you deal with cameras? Jibs. It blocks live audience view, but gets the live Metropolitan Opera feed to the theaters.
Roscoe.
Exactly what Jeff said, and long lenses and lots of cameras.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind is that these are typically not shows that are cut by the seat of your pants. It's very scripted, very blocked. There is a shot list. There is an AD who is calling out what shot the next camera is getting, and the director is going by, a well thought out script. It's very controlled.
Next question. Oh, Jeff, go ahead. Go ahead, Jeff, before we move on.
Yeah, so the person that's calling those and designing that is a person who is very familiar with opera, classical music producer usually, that directs this kind of thing. Also, it's important to note that all the actors are mic'd, somewhat invisibly, usually in the hair or somewhere hidden in the costume. So that's all mixed. And the orchestra is very close mic'd as well as some area miking.
Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, he says, when I tested a 14-inch MacBook Pro coming from a 2017 15-inch, it was surprisingly useful at default resolution. However, I tested ETC's EOS lighting software at 1280 by 800 on my MacBook Pro and felt cramped. Would I have similar issues on a 14-inch with 1512 by 982 resolution?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I think you would. That EOS lighting software does feel cramped. Even on a 27-inch iMac, you need a couple of screens usually to run it.
Next question.
This one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. At a college that had a horse program, don't know what that is. They held an event where students who had a relationship with the horse can say goodbye to one of the horses that was leaving the farm. Could non-human connections be as impactful in a virtual setting?
Go ahead, Jason.
Arguably, to the humans, I would say absolutely. To the horse, I would say absolutely not. I'm picturing, long ago, people were thinking, can you really convey emotion on a silver screen, with movies? Yeah, of course you can.
Go, Jeff.
Can non-human connections be important in a virtual setting? Impactful? Yes. I will just give you one example. Doug's cats.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Locally, in Big Bear, there's a set of eagles that for 2 seasons in a row have laid 2 eggs, and both eggs have not come to be baby chicked. And the emotions that have been expressed by people, the anticipation, of just seeing a little pip, and then the failure. I've really surprised how attached people came. Now, maybe it's because it was during COVID that people were really looking for life outside of their environments to celebrate. But it was hard to see how hard people took those.
Next question.
This one comes in from Tommy Weir in Ireland. Says, if you were speccing a computer for 3D modeling and animation using C4D and Octane, what direction would you choose? PC plus graphics card, or wait for the M1 Max desktop, or explore the MacBook Pro M1 Max?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
That's been a moving target for a long time, and for me too, because if you look behind me, I've got a bunch of HP Z workstations behind me, but ever since I bought my M1 Mac Mini, and I've seen what Apple Silicon can do and what may or may not be coming in the pipeline, I would hold out and see what the next desktop Mac has to show, especially with their own silicon.
I think it depends on what you're comfortable with, like what you're used to, as well as so are you a Mac person or a PC person? I would definitely, at this point, if I was a Mac person, probably not buy a PC to do 3D. I think Apple has turned that corner, and Cinema 4D is probably the number one. It's easier for Cinema 4D because they built their code a lot cleaner than I think most. So it's going to be easier for them to pivot, or it has been easier for them to pivot. So if you're looking at that specifically, I think you're gonna find that the returns are pretty high on the Mac, and it'll probably keep on getting better. If you need it today, I'd buy the laptop. I think that it's probably very fast. I mean, the multipliers that Maxon's talking about are insane. Next question.
Another one from Douglas Carmichael says, after the Fender acquisition of PreSonus, which secondary linear-oriented digital audio workstation should I switch to for electronic music? Would Logic be the best because of its spatial audio support?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, I think you'd be very happy with Logic. Of course, you're talking to somebody who's been on Logic for 30 years, and I really like it a lot. But all of the electronic music production, you would find the pads are very nice. You would find that the drum machine is very nice, and it has a good 808 built into it, and along with all the other features that Logic has, along with the Dolby Atmos that was just added for free. I think you'd really enjoy it very much.
That's what I'm focusing on, is Logic. So you'll probably see more labs in that area as far as what I'm working on for those things. Next question.
Coming in from Hector Rodriguez in Springfield, Virginia. He says, Mac OS Monterey is now available. Has anyone updated to it? If yes, what have you learned from it?
Go ahead, Jason.
I've learned that I really like selecting text in pictures. That sounds silly, but it's absolutely the very best thing that they added.
The problem is you cut and paste. I cut and pasted a picture that had 212 on it, and then it just put in notes 212. I was like, that's not what I was cut. I was trying to copy the picture and put it in notes, and it just said 212. Like, that was the only. I was like, that's not what I wanted. I wanted the whole picture. Anyway,
screenshot the picture, and before it gets to do the text recognition.
I know. It was like, I'm like, okay, Mitchell.
Hector, yes, I have upgraded, and it has fixed a few small niggling details that I've had. I've had problems with keyboard cutting in and out and acting weird. That's gone. And the other thing is, I like purple.
Go ahead, Chris. Nope, can't hear you.
I would say I very impulsively was just in a weird mood that day when it came out. I just updated all my machines all at once, like, total thin ice move, and I haven't had any problems.
Yeah, I've had a couple machines that a couple things that broke with Monterey, that have not, worked. Couple test environments, but overall it's been really, really stable. The most stable upgrade probably I've seen, and I don't have all my machines. I have the one I'm on right now is actually Catalina, and then I have a Big Sur, and then I have two Montereys. So they're all kind of floating around. And the Monterey one is actually probably the most stable of all of them, which is really unusual. Next question.
This one comes in from Chris Widener in Lafayette, Indiana. It says, what do you consider minimal usable signal strength for HD video streaming?
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, signal strength is a term that I'm not sure where to apply it, just because it usually think of it as being analog in a voltage or a RF signal strength. I'm going to assume it's a bandwidth, and then I'll go back to the 5 megabits per second for 1080p. Alex will bump that up to 10. But yeah, that's where I think that's what you're asking, because in the digital realm, signal strength is not something I usually associate with.
Next question.
Coming in from Sherman Patton in SLC, Utah, Salt Lake City, have been having issues with YouTube live events turning off the embed link when I go live, when it was enabled before going live. Do you know any ways to keep it from changing, or is it just him?
I just did a bunch of stuff with embeds, and I haven't had. Is it happening every single time you do it?
Yeah, so I created a new channel, set it up, and set up a handful of links, and all of them, whenever I went live, I'd have to go back through to the edit and go down to the embed code, and it de-toggled that little checkbox. So I don't know if there's like a global setting.
Yeah, because I didn't know that you could embed it with less than 1,000 followers. Like it used to be. I don't know if the rules are set. It may be you may be getting around it, but I had the impression that you needed 1,000 followers to get the embed to work. So it may be
definitely had it working, and it was new channels that I just basically set up, had streams, but basically I have the events set up and it has embed code enabled. As soon as I click the go live, I have to go back to edit and re-enable that.
Historically, there was a limit to where you could put embeds, so it may not be that thing. Maybe they've opened it up, but it may be a bit that's off, because I believe that we used to know that we had to get to a certain level before we could embed them. It was a problem that we had in the past, but I don't know where it is currently. Roscoe?
This may be unrelated, but I learned this recently. In Vimeo, you have to be careful, because if you start the stream and stop it, then you have to change the streaming key and all that kind of stuff. So that was just a lesson I learned. I don't know that applies to this at all.
This is still streaming. It's just not embedding. So it's just not allowing the embed, which is interesting. But again, as I said, we used to have a problem with the fact that we couldn't embed without a certain number of followers. Now they may have relaxed that, but there could be an error in the system related to that.
In this case, I had 0 followers, 0 subscribers, brand new channel. So
we definitely have experienced channels that are new have all kinds of problems. So there's when you're live streaming with brand new channels, you'll see all kinds of anomalies that you won't see after you get to a couple hundred followers. And that's the hard part you got to get. But they don't pay any. I mean, I feel like they don't pay attention to them at all until they get to a certain size. It used to be that you couldn't. When it first started, you couldn't even stream until you got to 10,000, and then it was down to 1,000, and they opened it up. But it was, but I felt like there was a limit on the minimum number of followers for embed, and so I don't know what's going on there.
Well, I'm glad this worked out, and if this was the least of my worries, then I can go ahead and hit a checkbox and keep going forward.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Coming in from Ken Jones in Seattle, he says, recently experienced some tearing of the video on OBS from any or all of our Vixia cameras through our ATEM Mini. Where should I look first?
Go ahead, Jason, real quick.
I would immediately look at your USB bus, but who knows?
Yeah, go ahead, Josh.
You want to check your frame rate settings, if frame rate of the cameras, frame rate of your displays. Check the loading of your computer. See if there's something running that you can ease the load of it. Sometimes the display capture works better than the window capture for tearing or drop frames.
Next, go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, on the I'm assuming you're going to have other cameras coming into that ATEM which aren't exhibiting this problem, so it is just those cameras. But also on the input, and that you're coming, also assuming you're coming in USB from the ATEM into OBS. But check for the buffering settings on that USB input, and then your overall frame rate settings in OBS. And it would be interesting to know if it's just something you're seeing on your local display, or whether you're also seeing it in your output, whether that's a file or a stream.
Next question.
This one comes in from Nick Anderson in Toronto. He says, I'm using QLab and ATEM OSC to automate switching on my ATEM Mini Pro ISO. There doesn't appear to be a default OSC command to take the upstream key and run to A and B keyframes. Is this best achieved through ATEM macros? Happy for any suggestions.
There are a ton of commands that are available via OSC from Mix Effect Pro. So I think that a lot of that got opened up, and I think that part of that was related to our work in office hours. So you may want to think about putting Mix Effect Pro in the middle of that to grab those. It'll give you access to a lot more features. Next question.
This one comes in from Tobias Moss in Minneapolis. Says, I just updated to Windows 11. Zoom is stuttering all morning. Oh no, help.
Go ahead, Rupert, real quick.
So some people have had success with Zoom on Windows 11. Some others have not. If you ask Zoom the official question, officially Windows 11 is not yet supported. So one possible thing you can do is ensure you're running the 64-bit version of the Windows installer at the latest version. Maybe do an uninstall. There's a very specific tool on the Zoom website that'll do a complete uninstall first. So try that.
Next question.
This one comes in from Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany. Says, what profiles or settings does the panel use in the WLM meter tool to adjust loudness?
I think it's to adjust the loudness or to adjust the settings for the reading of the loudness, I think is the question there. I have to admit.
Didn't Mickey make a YouTube video about this?
I think there's a YouTube video. Let's see if we can find a YouTube video and put it up, because I actually don't know what those settings are. So let's see if we can find that for him. Next question.
This one comes in from Brayton Barrialt in Moncton, New Brunswick, Canada. Says, what is your best recommendation for a budget camera for mirrorless interchangeable lens camera for use as a webcam?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I think Alex would recommend the Blackmagic because it maintains the ecosystem of being able to adjust it. But I am a real big fan of the Sony autofocus, and you can only get it on a Sony camera. And the fact that it has autofocus on it, and it's one of the very best out there. This particular model is their entry-level ZV-E10 with interchangeable lenses on it, around $700 at B&H.
We're just going to go a little bit over, and we'll finish off the questions that we have stacked up. Josh?
Yeah, those are good. You don't necessarily need the latest and greatest. You could just simply use the 6000 series, especially if you get it used. They pretty much have the same sensor as the newer ones anyway.
Good, Sky.
GH3 of the Sony Lumix. So not Sony, the Panasonic Lumix, and you can get lenses that'll fit on that. And that also has autofocus as well. And I think the used concept would be really, really healthy.
Next
HDMI
question.
out.
Okay, coming in from Bo Cardle in Charleston, South Carolina, says, Insert Studios, what are the economics like, and what's it like to get connected to LTN or the switch?
So the economics for Insert Studios is you really have to have enough density of area that the broadcasters need. So there's two different ways to build the studio. There's one that you can build that's going to be connected for people. So the question is, in Charleston, South Carolina, how many times do those people need to be on a network feed? Because local feeds, they'll just come into the radio, the station, the television station. But how many times does someone from Charleston need to go somewhere else? And that's the real question there. The other side of that, and to get connected to LTN, they're going to send you what's called a leaf, typically a leaf encoder that will that you'll either lease or purchase, that you'll put into your, and you can have just a send, or you can have send and receive. Send and receive is kind of luxurious because now you can see who you're talking to. Almost no Insert Studios do that. They're cheap, so they just do send, and then you get usually a POTS line back, a plain old plain old telephone system. So literally a wired line into your IFB is all you're going to get back from the television station. That's why everybody, if you watch, when you know what you're looking for, if you watch a broadcast, everyone has kind of dead eyes because they're not looking at each other. They're looking at a camera, the whole time. And so it really makes a difference when someone can actually see the person that they're talking to, but it doesn't happen very often. I think that the real kind of next gen of a lot of these things is really thinking about how do you create an insert studio for Skype calls and Zoom calls and all kinds of other things. And so what you want to do is have something that people can get on and then and jump on. And if you think about a workspace, we actually looked at trying to get them into WeWork because the idea is everyone's working, but if you want to do a presentation to your clients or do a customer facing stream or do something else, you need something a lot nicer than whatever you can afford. It'd be great to have $50,000 worth of hardware for X amount of, for an hour, not necessarily, you don't use it often enough to keep it in your office. And so those are the kind of things that I think are interesting. I think that adding things like Wacom tablets and being able to draw and being able to maybe have little ATEMs and someone to help you set that all up. So all you have to do is sit down and do it. I think there's a big market there. I have for quite some time. But I think you have to kind of think about how you're going to get the word out that's available. And I think that pretty much any community with over 100,000 people would probably be a community that you could probably keep working in that area, because getting online and doing those presentations are going to be important. And then the switch, I didn't address the switch. The switch is a lot more expensive than LTN. So you're going to pay for a port, which is going to be about $1,000 a month, and then you're going to pay for long distance charges if you're too far away from the POP. So you could, in Charleston, if they don't have a switch connection, it could be painfully expensive to do it. If they do, it might be a couple more thousand a month. So it might be $2,000 to $4,000 a month just to have the switch connection, and then it's about $360 an hour. So anyway, those are the brief numbers. Next question.
All right, our final one for the first hour says from Michael Drosty in Peoria, Illinois. Anyone here registering for the free virtual Final Cut Pro Summit, November 8th through 13th, in partnership with OWC?
Go ahead, Chris.
Our preference is that you all register. I have registered. I'm actually hosting two events. One is a discussion on the first day about why these various people chose Final Cut, and then on the last day, I'm doing an interview with Justine. And there's another one you should definitely check out. Alex will be on Friday talking about the future of all technology to all mankind, or something like that. He's on a panel. It'll be good.
Should be a fun panel. Go ahead, Jason.
Oh man, Alex gets to play futurist. Oh wait a minute, that's like every day. Yeah, count me in. That's awesome.
Yeah, I definitely would highly recommend if you're interested in Final Cut at all. I think it's going to be a great conference. So definitely check it out. So I'm. This used to be a conference that I didn't even consider because I'd have to go to San Jose, and so and do it. And so the fact that it's moving virtual, I think this is a great example of, it's a great example of why virtual is important, is because a lot more people are going to get involved and from a lot more places in the world. Than it was kind of like this little edge thing, and it has the potential now to become a really big event. Because doesn't cost anything, and that it's able to be, you don't have to fly to do it. So anyway, which we've now found is very unstable. Just ask American Airlines and Southwest how flying is working for them. I looked at something recently that I had to fly to, and I just didn't know if I'd get there. Like I literally just said I can't fly there because the main flights in and out are Southwest, and I just don't know if I buy the ticket whether I'll actually be there on time. It's a crazy thing to think about for our industry, to think about where you can't fly because it's not predictable to actually get there. So this is yet another thing that's going to keep on pushing virtual events down the path if it continues to roll out. And my prediction is this fall will get much worse before it gets better, and it could destroy the market, and really build people around different things. Anyway. Now we're going to change subjects to ATEM audio. So, which I will admit that I don't use as much as I probably should, but we do have some folks here that I believe have some experience with that, and we want to ask, kind of manage some questions. This was a popular one. There are very powerful tools in the ATEM. So I will say the I/O of getting in and out of it is a little funky from an analog perspective, but the tools that they brought in from Fairlight are very powerful. I mean, when you open up the audio interface. So what we're going to do is we had a couple people that wanted to ask questions related to that, and so we're going to open it up to everyone before we jump into any kind of overview. Or we're just going to go ahead and jump into the questions because there's enough questions stacked up. So let's jump into the questions.
Okie doke. Coming in from Paul Terpasta in Jonesville says, "Can you make ATEM Mini turn on a mic by default when it powers up?"
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. Set it the way that you want it, and then save your startup state, and it will be on when you turn it on.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, Jason just said it. Yeah, save your startup state, and it'll even save the level settings and everything else, and whichever ones are on.
Yep. Go ahead. Next question.
Okay. Douglas Carmichael asks, "Can you direct audio sources from the Constellation to an external mix engine like the Allen Heath D-Live via MADI to mix a show manually?"
And the answer is no. We got to cue the wah wah. so the ATEM will take, I believe I want to say 60. Is it 64 channels or 32 channels? It's either 32 or 64 channels in, but it puts 2 out. So on Maddie, I don't fully understand the thought process related to that, of why you would have a whole bunch in and not a whole bunch out. But it is a key reason why we don't even really look at the ATEM that deeply, is because of this I/O problem of all these ins and no outs. And so it makes it very difficult for us. And so that's why we've kept our audio outside of the ATEM. It's one of the reasons, one of the biggest reasons on the Constellation. Now, there are some advantages to the Constellation because there's enough mix engine in there. If you're doing a simple stream and you want to do things like add the audio from your iPad or add audio from a camera, that's really easy because it comes in embedded and now you have control of it and you can use it as basically a de-embedder into your show. So there are a couple good reasons to do that. But the fact that that you can't get all those outputs out again is somewhat painful. Next question.
This one comes in from Nathan G.S. in Singapore. He says, in a situation where multiple person audio is coming in via a mixer into the mic in to the ATEM, how would you set up the limiter settings in the ATEM?
Go ahead, Jeff.
If you've got it coming in from a mixer, you probably want to do everything in that mixer before it gets into the mic in, but a limiter on the end of things is a great idea. One of the biggest complaints, we know how important audio is, one of the biggest complaints is that things are not loud enough. And a limiter allows you to bring up the average level because you are limiting the peaks. So you reduce the peaks in the limiter and then you turn everything up. So a limiter is a great way to just make the overall program louder and then people don't complain about that. So where would I set the limiter settings? Probably somewhere, I would do a compression, a gentle bus compression. Probably a 2-to-1 ratio is about max that I would call gentle. And that would be somewhere 16, 20 dB minus dBFS below our peak. And then I'd have a limiter kind of 1 or 2 dB down just to keep the peaks from completely clipping.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
And although you said mic in on the ATEM and they're marked mic in, make sure you change the settings on your ATEM to line in, and I would come in at a line level rather than coming in at the mic level, because if you have it set in microphone mode, it'll be putting some voltage across that for condenser, for electret condenser microphones, and it'll give you stereo in if you go to line mode as well.
And I think that one of the big challenges, especially when you're building a kit that is big enough that you bought a Constellation, the issue is that the Constellation is basically a single bus. You can go into different, unless someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's a single bus. You can do some correction, some EQ on the end, but when you start spending that kind of money, you kind of feel like, well, I'd like to have a mixer that gave me some more options, that gave me more flexibility, where I can kind of group my channels. I can do a lot of other things, and so even an XR18 would typically give you more than that, and definitely an X32 would give you a lot more to build that. So you just kind of, when you do, the one thing we have done in a pinch is you put every person's audio onto a different camera, so they all come in as separate channels into the as different cameras, and you can mix it there as well. And so it can be done, but it's a little funky. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Something similar that I've done where I've kind of gotten around things, like you say, taking different people's audio into different cameras. I've taken a board mix into one camera in a music situation and then put a pair of room mics into another camera, and then on the ATEM I can blend audience response, room sound, so when we get to the end of a piece and there's applause, I can push that channel up and then pull it back down, so I have some control over that. I'd love to have done that just completely in an outside audio mixer, but in situations where I'm constrained and those are my only options, well, I'll go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
From Jeff Francis, who we just heard from in Columbia, South Carolina. Has anyone ever seen the analog input routing get misaligned? In other words, the left goes into the right channel and nothing goes into the left channel.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So I put this question in because this happened to me and I fought this one for a while, and this was not a connector issue. I definitely triple checked all my wiring. What I determined, and I don't know, I've upgraded to the latest firmware and it seems to be better but not perfect, is that if you, in the audio settings of the ATEM Mini Pro, you can split the analog inputs to be either stereo or dual mono. And when you do that, the delay trim, which allows you to have 0 to 8 frames of delay to compensate, gets split. If you set those delay trims differently and then you go back to a stereo channel, it messes up the routing of the audio. So I would split and just use a one channel in mono, and I would delay it with 2 frames of delay. And then I would put that back to a stereo input, and I would lose one of my channels, and the left channel would end up on the right channel. And what was happening was I was recalling previously saved setups.
Right.
And so all of these settings were in there. So I just put that in as a warning. Be careful about splitting your audio and having different frame delays.
Interesting. That's a really
I've chased my wiring around for a lot.
I think you should write that as a description and send it to Blackmagic, because that's a really obscure bug that's related. Now, one note to that is, one of the things about the delay that Jeff mentioned is the delay only works with the analog inputs, so you can't delay the SDI camera inputs. Now, theoretically, I think the thought process is that if you're embedding the audio in the camera into the SDI, that it's going to be in sync when it arrives, but not always, and that's a little bit of a limitation there. Next question.
This one comes in from Nathan GS in Singapore. He says, when would you ideally use the expander gate settings, and what are the key settings to take note of?
Expanders are going to, basically, go ahead, Jeff.
So I'm using the Pile mic directly into the ATEM Mini Pro. So it's set to mic with power. And then on that channel, I have a gentle expander so that when I stop talking, it will turn me down. And I've got it set right now to be 10 dB of gain reduction. So when I stop talking, you'll hear the background noise fade out. So, and then I have a little bit of compression as well. So when I'm talking loud, it will turn that down. So I have both expansion and compression on my mic.
Oh, sorry. Next question.
Okay, coming in from Nathan GS in Singapore, said, would it be better to bring in audio from a mixer into an HDMI audio embedder and use one of the HDMI inputs as the audio in?
I don't think it would be better. I think you're just adding another thing to the chain. So I think that it's better to try to go ahead and figure out how to get line level into the ATEM, through the headphone jacks. They're not a great solution. If you're doing a long run, it might make sense. I'd rather try to find it into a camera. Go ahead, Jeff.
One good solution I found is if you're running Dante, using a Dante Avio, that will get you to XLR balanced Pro level, line level, and then a very short adapter that goes from 2 XLRs to 1/4 inch. And if you give me 1 second, I'll hold up what I'm talking about. So you have the Avio and then 2 XLRs into an 1/8 inch into the line level of the ATEM.
Yeah, and I think that the thing is that one note here is to try to get, and this is a general note, is try to have a great preamp for a microphone and then get it to line level as fast as possible. You're gonna, you have to remember that your mic voltage is very, very low. And so it has a tendency to be much closer to the voltage of everything else around it. So I mean, it's going to pick up a lot of other noise and so on and so forth. So getting to line level as fast as possible is really important. And so a lot of times we used to use the MM1s a lot to do that, is because I have a nice limited analog input, and then I can get that to line level and then take it wherever I need to take it. So just consider that. And then especially when you're dealing with anything that is unbalanced like the ATEM, short runs, as Jeff said, short runs and high quality cables. Next question.
This one comes in from Nathan Gios in Singapore. It says, do you ever see Blackmagic implementing pro audio connectors in their ATEM mini line?
Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I don't see them ever doing that.
I feel like the Mini Extreme Pro Max somewhere needs to have. I mean, they know what TA3s look like. I mean, we see them in their cameras. You feel like they know what they are. It's not like they no one's told them. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you said it. They wouldn't put XLRs in, but they could put TA3s, and there's just barely enough room to put those in. But surface mount connectors is what they're trying to stay away from. Trying to stay with.
Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, they are downright running out of superlatives. So I don't know. I don't know if it'll even ever happen.
I think they call it
even
the super.
SPDIF. Yeah.
Yeah. The Pro.
Final
exactly.
12.
Generic. Yeah. Next question.
This one comes in from our own Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. He says, Jeff Francis helped me early days work out a delay problem, but it seemed to solve itself. Why? Or is it going to be bad again someday?
So, Sky, what was the issue?
At my church, early days, we could not get the sync figured out. And eventually it just kind of settled into itself. And I kept blaming the Baptist down the street that hogged the bandwidth, but I don't know what
What were you streaming with?
We were coming into an ATEM, not even a Pro. It was just the original ATEM, coming out of two Sony.
What were you streaming with? What was the encoder?
vMix.
Okay.
Went straight into a laptop and then straight up to YouTube. So it's a very simple path.
And how powerful was the laptop? Would you say it was high end, middle?
Brand new Alienware at the time, with plenty of RAM and yeah, brand new at the time, 2 years ago. Gosh, 2 years ago.
Sync settling in.
Yeah.
It's usually a software encoder. Like it usually has very little to do with something that's a, FPGA type thing isn't going to have sync settling in. Encoders will. So software encoders, we used to lose sync if we pulled the headphone jack out of a computer with Wirecast. If you took the headphone jack out or put it in, you would lose sync in your video. So you just have to be very careful. But if you see sync that is off and then on without any changes, that's the software encoder doing something that it usually means that it's overdrawing overdriving the what the hardware.
And that's the
do.
only thing on that laptop. It's the only thing that laptop does. That's not taxed. It's not being taxed to do.
Yep, I'm just telling you
things. No, I agree.
That's the only. It's not the first place we look. Only place.
It just got to the point
if sync is drifting, we only look at the software encoder.
Yeah, just don't touch it after a while.
Well, it's just don't use software to encode.
Thank you.
Anyway, next question.
Coming in from Carl Marxer. It's a name and an ideology. From New York. He says, what are the most desirable dynamic settings for using ATEM Extreme ISO with Zoom ISO and attendees for voices, i.e. expander, gate, compressor, or limiter?
Well, one thing I can tell you to be careful of is the compressor. So when you have a lot of attendees, remember that compressors compressing everything together. It's pulling things that are not as loud into something that with your main stuff. So it's very easy for you to pull the audience into your mix with a compressor, especially if it digs down too low. So if you start having it dig into the -20, negative or more into that compression, you can definitely pull the audience into the show, which can be good and sometimes not. Go ahead, Jason.
I feel like we always end up with some version of how do I set my compressor correctly, which is kind of backwards. If you don't understand how it works, it's never going to do what you need it to do. If you need a place to start, look at the ATEM manual. They actually give you normal settings for voice, and it's not great, but it's not a bad place to start.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Avoid the gate. That's the first thing to say, because a gate will never be helpful. If you want to reduce background noise, a very gentle expansion, and then again in compression, stay gentle. 2 to 1 is getting to the point of being beyond gentle. So, people think I need to turn that knob up to 4 or 10 or something. 2 is still gentle, but don't go too much beyond that in either direction, expansion or compression. And the easiest thing to look at is to always look at the gain reduction, because that tells you how much that expansion or compression is doing.
Next question.
This one comes in from Douglas Carmichael, who says, can you link the ATEM audio mixer to an external control surface?
I believe you can. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, you absolutely can. Just turn MIDI on, and you absolutely can.
Next question.
From our own Sky Gleason in Seattle, he says, on November 12th, Mad in the Kitchen is doing a live Zoom event from Pike's Place Market with 3 chefs. Would anyone like some A2 practice into the ATEM?
So there you go. Contact Sky in Discord if you're interested in playing with that. November 12th. So that's coming up, right? It's not too far away.
No, it's not. And we're actually rehearsing and everything. And Mickey and Jim Hankin.
You're rehearsing?
Oh,
for a show?
Yeah, it happened. Your fault. Your fault.
I'm thrown off. I don't
blame
understand.
the Lindsay. We call it the Lindsay effect.
All right, next question.
From Todd Rains in Allen, Texas, says, what strategy might you have to set audio effects, gate, limiter, EQ, etc., on yourself?
And for the producers, this will be a shorter show if we don't have more questions. This is the last one. So we'll switch to after hours a little early if we don't see some more. Go ahead, Jeff.
Get a trusted friend. Get Mickey on the other end of a Zoom call, and because you need someone on the other end who can listen and tell you what you need to do. I can kind of set a little bit the expansion on my voice. So if I stop talking, change the threshold. So I'm going to raise the threshold up really high, and you see that I'm not actually triggering it. So it's not coming out of expansion. And if I set that threshold, if I can get my mouse to work, really, really low, that I'm not actually doing any expansion whatsoever, so you never hear that drop when I stop talking.
Next question. Oh, sorry, Jason. Jason, go ahead.
It's extremely hard to do this on yourself. I've been doing this for years, and it even I needed Mickey at one point to get this SafeX channel, right where I needed it. There is a really useful panel, or at least there used to be, in Audio Hijack in the recording panel that will actually talk and then talk back. So you talk, and it basically is just an echo chamber. It just pauses, and then it gives you 5 seconds back. And that's the best you're going to get.
Next question.
Currently the last question, unless some more comes in, from Ari Block in Tel Aviv, Israel, says, a client purchased a Polycom Studio Bar P009 for use with Zoom. What software-based audio treatment for a PC would help in getting rid of the roomy sound?
The audio treatment, getting rid of the roomy sound. Well, the PC making sound and the audio making the roomy sound are two different things to me. I mean, I think that generally you want to look at every wall that's smooth as a mirror for your audio. So you want to think about how to remove those mirrors. And so trying to diffuse them, get them to not point at each other. Those are all things that you want to think about. And then from the PC, there are a variety of quiet boxes that we've put them in. Some of that has to do with also what PCs, like we used to use there was an Elemental that was actually built as a Z800 because the Z800 was huge, wide and everything else, but it made almost no noise at all. So it just depends on what you have there. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, turn off original sound in Zoom. I'm not sure what the Polycom Studio bar is. Perhaps it's a steerable audio, multi-microphone microphone array for picking up conference sounds, etc. And you may have to tune that for the room. And as Alex has said, try and hang treatments on the walls to eliminate parallel surfaces, and that's the best way for getting rid of a roomy sound. And there's, there are applications that run on a PC, and the RTX stuff from NVIDIA actually does a pretty good job at removing roomy sound. But if that's what you're talking about, if you're trying to get rid of the sound of the PCs in the room, that's something else, and that would be putting it in a soundproof cabinet of some sort.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
Zoom allows you to have a separate video and audio source, so let the Polycom Studio bar be your camera and get some kind of board table USB puck mic and connect that to the PC so that at least it's closer to everyone who's speaking. You put it in the center of the boardroom table.
Next question.
Well, some more came in here from Carl Marxer in New York. Says, any idea when we might get ISO audio outputs with Zoom ISO? Then we could mix each participant on the ATEM switcher, right?
Go ahead, Jason.
You get ISO audio outputs when you record. Getting them live is an SDI workflow. That's why the ATEM switchers with SDI out have that mix minus, return feed built right in.
Yeah, you do. Yeah. We don't have it yet. So for live, I don't think it has to do with the technical limitation. I think there's some other choices being made there. Next question.
This one comes in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. Says, are there any audio-video sync tools that work well for audio that pass through the ATEM? How can it be used to sync audio that does not pass through the ATEM?
Well, you have to. The sync should be that you should measure it at the very end, and you have to have something that has control over it. So it has to be an analog input into the ATEM for you to be able to make any sync adjustment in the ATEM. If you don't have that, then it's not going to work. So you have to kind of take that into account, and that can be a yeah, that can be you just need to have some file that has audio and video matching up. Go ahead, Sky.
That's what I was going to get to, that file. And I know there's a couple of different things on YouTube, and somebody has passed on and I've completely forgotten. So maybe we can bring that back up, but it has visual with an audible sound so that you can try to record something and see how far you're off your.
The easiest way to test this to see how it's going is specifically you need a file that has a graphic pop up, and then it has a graphic pop up with a sound, and you can build one of these in Final Cut or build one of these in something else. It just has to have something that turns on and off, but it turns on and then it turns off, and it has a tone at the same time, and you want to line it up perfectly to the frame inside of Final Cut, then render it out, then open it up again and make sure it's still there exactly the way you had it. Then you run that through the system. Now I do a couple things with sync tracks that I build, which is that I offset the amount of time. If I don't have it just repeat the same, like go beep, 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 because I can't tell where I am, in the frame. So I make the length of the beep different lengths. So it's long, short, not same, so 4 different lengths. Because then when I look at it in Final Cut, if I take that file and you stream it to YouTube, then you use one of the YouTube things to download it. Then you put it into Final Cut. It may seem like a roundabout way to do it, but you take the file and you put it in there and you see how many frames am I off, and you can see that pattern. And it's really easy for you to line it up and decide how many frames you are off. When you get that may seem like a really hard thing to do, but we used to do it all the time actually because we would have no stage time. So we had no stage time, but I have lots of time in between when the show happens and everything else. So I get someone to take a slate and just walk up to the stage and hit it once, and that's all I needed. Like if it was in frame and you just hit it once, I'd go back and grab the HLS frames and figure out what my offset was. And so sometimes you have to figure out where you can spend time to make that work. Next question.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say, and if
Courtney, sorry, I missed you there.
When you are recording that, make sure you're using an intra-frame. You don't use any long GOP compression because that will work as variable bit rate, and so you need a constant bit rate like ProRes to record that in and to do your testing with. That way, you know at least it's going to start in sync before it gets munched on by all the other YouTube things. All right, next question coming in from Kenneth Jones in Seattle says, could Jeff explain the function of the 3 controls for the expander in the ATEM Mini?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm going to try to make this quick because I have to get to class. There's actually 6 controls in the expander. So an expander takes quiet sounds and makes them quieter. So everything above the threshold is untouched and passes through at unity gain. So the threshold is the decision level of loud sounds above that number, and mine's set at -30. Sounds above that are untouched, and sounds below that get turned down. Range is how much they get turned down. A maximum, mine is set to 10 dB, so a maximum of 10 dB. Ratio is how steep that slope is of turning things down. And then attack, hold, and release are timing. So attack is generally going to be fairly short so that when I talk, the expander goes away. Hold will keep that open at unity gain for a longer period of time. I have mine set to 500 milliseconds or half a second. And then I have a very long release for voice, so that it takes 2 seconds for the 10 dB gain reduction to come in. So that in between my words when I'm talking, I stay at unity gain. And when I stop talking, you hear the things drop.
It's great. Go ahead, Chris.
I've been doing this a long time, and I've never understood that an expander makes quieter things quieter. I learn stuff here every day.
I mean, it's basically
it's a bad name. It should be a quieter.
A shutter-upper? Is that what you're going for?
Quieter.
Yeah,
expander? That's dumb.
It's basically, I mean, it's kind of the inverse of the compressor, right? So next question. Oh, go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead before we go ahead, Jeff.
An expander expands the dynamic range, the range between the louds and the softs.
Instead of
so it takes quiet stuff and makes it quieter. A compressor takes loud stuff and makes it quieter, which therefore makes less of a difference, and it compresses the dynamic range. Why do we always turn stuff down? Because then we don't clip anything. So both of them work by turning things down. Expander turns the quiets, compressor turns the louds down.
Next question.
That's awesome.
Okay, coming in from Robert.
And I'm off to
Shoji.
class.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right. Bye-bye, Jeff. Robert Shoji in Los Angeles says, where can I purchase the XLR to mini jack adapter that Jeff showed earlier?
Go ahead, Courtney.
I think you can get those from HOSA, H-O-S-A, and Monoprice probably sells some pre-made cables, and they have them in different lengths. Make sure you get the right sex of XLR connector, and probably you want the female, to the 1/8" Mini.
Next question. Did we lose Courtney?
Oh,
no,
sorry.
Yep.
No, Courtney clicked the button and it didn't work. Stefan Fischer in Würzburg, Germany says, where in the chain did you recommend doing the main amplification of the system, before or in the ATEM Mini?
Go, Jason.
Alex nailed it the first time. Get it to line level as quickly as possible and then decide what to do with it.
And the main thing is that, you want to always pay attention to where your levels are at all your sources. So if you're turning something wildly in any place in your audio chain, something's wrong. so when you get over about 70% on anything, something is wrong in your chain. Don't like that is a I'm past 2 o'clock. If you're turning it up, I'm past 2 o'clock, and that means I need to reevaluate my entire chain to figure out what's going on, because you're going to be bringing noise into your signal and all kinds of other things. And so anything turned all the way up in a audio chain is broken, and you need to figure out what it is. And that can be your transmitter that's going to your camera. It can be the camera gain. It can be, you want to start looking at that chain really, really closely. Next question.
Okay, coming in from Nathan GS in Singapore, says, from a mixer, which output channels are preferred to bring audio into the ATEM, i.e. the main XLR ones, the headphones out, or the aux out?
Go ahead, Jason.
I'm going to give you the Mickey, it depends. Any bus system out, yes, it depends. Any bus system out, so if you've got a stereo bus that you can aux send left, right, and pan them, it depends, left or right, that'll work just fine. What matters most is that you get your input levels right.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And it's always best to match impedances between the output of your mixer and the input of your device like the ATEM Mini. The ATEM Mini has high impedance inputs, or minus 10 inputs. And so the output of your mixer, most mixers will have a tape out connector, which is the minus 10 level. So it's designed for interfacing with consumer electronics. So use those. They're RCA jacks and they're unbalanced. And take those out. RCA to the Mini plug in will give you, and set the ATEM Mini to line input. And that will give you impedance matched. If you're coming out of a mixer out of balanced XLRs, you're going to have to unbalance them on your way in, and you're going to screw up your levels and a little bit of the frequency response on the impedance mismatch between the 600 ohms or 800 ohms of the output of the balanced line outs into the high impedance of the input on the ATEM Mini.
Next question.
Coming in from Robert Shoji in Los Angeles, he says, can you elaborate on how to adjust the ATEM audio levels with an external controller?
And this has to do, I think, with the MIDI controllers that you can actually apply to those. And I believe that you can use the is it Jason, is the Korg is that the one you recommend?
Yeah, the Korg, what is it? The Korg Micro. They have a few. So one is a keyboard, right, and one has a whole bunch of little faders. And I could swear Fenwick did this for the longest time and was pretty happy with it. Were you controlling?
Fenwick looks confused.
Fenwick looks confused. So clearly I got that wrong.
No, it's a common state. I'm just curious. I glanced away for a moment. What were you talking about, Jason?
The MIDI control for audio using the Korg. Wasn't that you?
Yeah, I use that. So the Korg Nano Controller 2, it's just a stupid USB 2. It plugs directly into the side of the Mix Pre, and it allows me to control the inputs. It actually gives you more control because it gives you controls over channels that don't have knobs on the front panel. Total plus, at least on the 6. And then you can have a direct knob to adjust the gain as opposed to just the level of the channel, or you can make that knob, you can tell that knob to be the pan control. It's pretty cool.
I'll give one more. I'll put a link in the chat. Our own John Barker has a very detailed video on this, and I'll just put it in.
Yeah, go ahead, Sherman.
What's the cable path signal flow for the MIDI? You're saying it's from a computer running the same software?
Okay, so here's the Mix Pre. And right there is a USB 2 and a USB 3. The USB 3 goes directly to the computer. The USB 2 comes right down to this guy. So it's literally just plugged directly into the Mix Pre. There's no audio that goes through it. It's just a controller.
But for the MIDI to hit the ATEM, is that that same computer running the ATEM software, and that's where the MIDI hits the controls?
It is, but it's, in my case, it's just controlling the Mix Pre audio. It doesn't actually get
Mix Pre,
into
not the ATEM. Gotcha.
Yes.
All right, the link
I apologize for the confusion.
The link's in Mukana.
Next question.
Coming in from Graham Cardwell in Belfast, Northern Ireland, it says, do you need a digital audio source such as a Mix Pre or a Flow 8 to work properly with the ATEM audio, or do they take a direct feed from an analog mic?
Go ahead, Kenneth.
Well, they will take a feed from an analog microphone. That's the way it works primarily. You're going to plug a microphone into a camera, which will provide the HDMI embed audio into the ATEM, or you can plug an analog microphone into either of the two microphone sockets, those little 1/8-inch stereo connections. They will provide, if you select it for microphone, a polarizing voltage for an electret of 5 volts or thereabouts. I think we measured it at 3 or something like that. It's not phantom power. It's low voltage power for an electret, and it's designed to do exactly that. It doesn't. I don't think there's a way where a digital audio source can be brought into an ATEM Mini. It expects it only works with analog, to my understanding.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the only way to get a digital source in is with an embedder and come in as an HDMI signal. You could embed it
with the Mini. With the Mini, because with the ATEM,
with the Constellation and the M1s and M2s, you have analog XLR inputs. And do you have a digital input on those, Alex?
MADI.
An optical in?
MADI. So
MADI.
you'd be able to you can do MADI in to the Constellation.
Yeah, but MADI is no fun.
Yeah, it's a little wonky, but it can be done. I mean, so and for our pipeline, you have to take you take Dante and you use an RME. Digiface to go from Dante to MADI, and then you go MADI into the switcher.
Do they have are the XLR inputs switchable to AES digital input?
The ATEM has TRS, so I don't think it does. I think it's just stereo input if you want to do it that way.
I've got the full panel, and no, you still need a separate device for that.
Yeah. So there you go. All right. Well, we're ending a little early, but we had the same question velocity, so it just meant that we answered them faster. so we actually, if you look at it, we actually are pretty high on the number of answers that we gave. We just cut through them a lot faster than normal, and so we're like. So that was very well done. So plenty of questions from the producers. Thank you so much for the great conversation, and also succinct and useful questions from the panel. So great work. And we're just running up a little bit. I think we reached the end of this conversation. So anyway, fantastic work. And tomorrow, I'm pretty excited about tomorrow. The USDZ conversation. I think it's gonna be pretty slick. I would highly recommend checking it out. I guess since we have a minute, there's an incredible future coming with 3D. I'm just letting you know, it is going to be massive, and there's such a huge opportunity. And it's really, oftentimes they say that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And the reason that I'm pushing USDZ so hard is that there is a huge opportunity coming, and we can prepare for it. We can prepare for it right now and get good at it and kind of be ready. We figured out all the things that there were to do before it becomes a big rush. And that rush most likely will happen sometime next year. And so when that hits the fan, it'd be great if we understood what to do with it, And so that's all, So I'm just I think that the big thing is that once 3D models become something that any Mac user might want to use, for what they're doing. And we're already seeing it in what we're going to talk about tomorrow. The client has already seen huge efficiency changes because once you can take a 3D model and you can rotate it around and then take a new screen capture, you don't have to figure out how you're going to do a new photo shoot. And how do I figure out how to put that object into the right place, or how do I animate it in a circle, or how do I do all that stuff? All that stuff has become something that used to be a big 3D application and lots of rendering, and now it's just like, I got it done. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I've been working with Chris Fitchie to model the new rocket that we're working on now.
Yep.
So that I can take the USDZ version of it and take it into the pub.
Yep.
And show him where the thing's going to sit, and then he's going to give me some sponsorship money.
Yep. No, it is. Every time people touch it, touch USDZ, and you give it to them, they can put it on their phone or they can open it up. And now I sent someone files like, here's your theater, and you just rotate it around and look at it, and put yourself in it and figure out what it would be like to sit in the seat. And that's just in preview. It's not like a complicated application. That's just opening preview on the Mac, and you can see the 3D model and rotate around and do whatever you want to do with it. It's pretty powerful. Go ahead, Jason.
My very favorite thing about USDZ is that there is absolutely, if you've got an even somewhat modern iPhone, there is absolutely zero things to know about it. I gave it to an attorney. Attorneys in general are not some of the more technologically sophisticated people, and I had to model this this new law firm in order to do the networking. It's just the way that I work. So I just texted it to him and I said, just take a look at this next time you're in the conference room, because he has this huge conference table, and boop, it popped right down, and it blew his mind. So yes, there are so many uses for this. I also gave it to somebody who's in their 70s who was running a gala, and it raised a ton of money for these homes they wanted to build for the homeless.
Well, and the main thing is that it is it's suddenly there's the hard part has been to produce the content. So what we're going to show you is the pipeline. The pipeline tomorrow is how to actually produce the 3D models, which is not simple and not well known and almost completely undocumented. You can search for almost anything in the web except for how to build USDC models. So it was, what we're about to do is save you about hundreds of hours of research tomorrow. That mostly was Chris and some Jesse and some Alex Goldner and some me. And so there's a bunch of us all thinking about it, and we're going to dump how we've gotten it done, and hopefully get some of you excited, because what I think we'll do is a lot of us will start playing with it, and then we'll learn more. But there's an opportunity for us within this community to get really good at it before it becomes something that there's a big rush. And we'll talk about some of the opportunities tomorrow. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Happy 588 day.
588 times we've done this.
588.
Amazing. It's crazy. All right. We'll see you in after hours.